Okay, hold on, guys. I gotta get my books. They're ginormous, and there's so many of them, I don't even know if I can pick them up. Oh no, oh no. Okay, okay. Ha! This isn't even all of my favorite books. Oh, dang it. I don't have When the Moon Hatched. Megan, I need that book.
Oh my God,
Okay.
it's so good.
Okay, so these are some of my favorite books, and Megan and I are here to talk. We're here to talk about the psychology of reading and how reading books like this, or books like What's on Top, like Radical Remission, Untamed, personal development books, really reading of any kind, can help you cope and just thrive through your cancer diagnosis with ocular melanoma. So, newsflash, both Megan and I have ocular melanoma. Megan, what eye were you diagnosed in?
It's in my right eye.
I was diagnosed with my right eye too. Look at that. Twins. We're twins. And we love some of the same books. So I was so excited to find Megan on Instagram. She is literally such a doll and she's so fun. Like, so much fun to talk to. I'm just going to drop one of my favorite quotes that has been super empowering for me this year. And it is from A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. And it is, "Only you can decide what breaks you." I love that quote. And I know that's one of your favorite quotes too. Megan, I saw one of your Instagrams and you shared this reel that was talking about just some of the things that you have kind of drawn some connections to that have helped you in coping with what you've been dealing with since, what, 2023?
2023. I was diagnosed in September of 2023, so it's almost been 1 year.
So talk to us a little about some of the connections that you've been able to make just in the stories that you've read since you were diagnosed, and also the books that you have read alongside things that you've been experiencing, like scans and taking medicine and things like that.
Thank you. And it's been amazing to meet you too, Danae. It's been incredible to connect with you over all of these books, as well as our diagnosis. I have been a fantasy reader for a long time, but I fell out of it an amount of time. I really found that reading these fantasy books with these incredible heroines and main characters who are going through so much really allowed me to see parts of my journey in their journeys. So some of these characters are going through things that are similar to what I'm going through, even if it's not because of a cancer diagnosis. So for example, Jude Duarte, who is one of my favorite characters from Holly Black's The Cruel Prince, she takes poison in an attempt to make herself immune from it, a process called mithridatism, if I'm pronouncing that right. And it makes me think about my own journey with Sutin, taking a chemo pill, taking something that sort of feels akin to that, like poisoning myself, to make myself stronger in the end and really make myself immune from that. And so that was something that I really found powerful.
Okay, and then like what about like dealing with some of the eye side effects? Like one of the things on your reel says, "My eye isn't drippy and red and permanently dilated. My eye is..."
Yeah, scarred and a sign of my survival, honestly.
Yeah.
There are two characters that really came to mind. You know, I was thinking about how different I feel when I look in the mirror right now, and I'm still adjusting to, you know, the way that my eye and my face look. And something that's really powerful from these books is that characters often bear scars and, you know, the signs of their survival on the way that they appear as well. And so I read from Blood and Ash, the main character Poppy has scarring on her face that's a sign of her survival. I read A Court of Thorns and Roses. Lucian Van Serra has a mechanical eye. That's a sign of his survival. And just thinking about how these characters bear those scars as a testament to their survival helps me think about, you know, the changes in the way that I look.
I know one of our favorite characters, like both of our favorites, is Aelin. Aelin from the Throne of Glass series. And I loved what you said about how I'm not getting my scans. I'm channeling Aelin in the iron box, because I know so many of us feel that sense of claustrophobic, like we feel claustrophobic or we feel super anxious when we go in the MRI tube. That was super powerful for me, especially because that's such a challenging period in this character's story in Throne of Glass.
When I had my first MRI, it was around the time that I was reading Kingdom of Ash, which is the last book in the Throne of Glass series. This is such an emotional read for me. And I had never had an MRI previously. And so the experience is being in this iron box. It's loud, it's terrifying, you can't move. It makes you really feel so powerless over the situation that's happening to you. I remember reading the scenes of Aelin being in the iron box and just feeling in the scene, her mom comes and speaks to her. Just really thinking about that scene while I was in the MRI machine and in my own iron box just made me feel like I was experiencing something that this character had experienced, overcome, triumphed over. And it helped me get through that really difficult experience.
Well, and one of my favorite quotes that actually kind of crosses the universes in Sarah's stories there is, "You do not yield. You do not fear, you do not falter, you do not yield." And obviously we still feel fear, right? We feel the scariness of the scans coming up. I know like I have scans coming up in less than a month, and I'm already a little bit of an anxious wreck. However, like just that inner strength that almost comes from like kind of borrowing the affirmation of this character, if that makes any sense, that helps me a lot. And I think there's another one that I really like from Silver Flames. Maybe you remember, it's from when they're doing the mind stilling, right? So mind stilling in the story is basically, it's equivalent to meditation, and they are learning how to, apply mind stilling. And one of the things that it says is, "I am the rock against which the surf crashes. Nothing can break me." That's been a powerful thing for me as well, is just to kind of remind myself of that inner strength. And to be able to do that using these stories has been pivotal for me, especially in dealing with a metastatic diagnosis recurrence. Cancer spread and then came back. Obviously not fun, but I like to say a book a day, whatever this says, keeps the mental breakdowns away. That's what my shirt says. And I live by this because I literally will read. And so when I came across Megan's account on Instagram, and she was basically just talking about the psychology of reading and relating it to her cancer journey, and to just really just applying it to how the brain works, it was so fascinating to me because I eat this stuff up. Megan, let's kind of dive in a little bit more. Is there anything else you want to share before we get started on the whole like healthy escapism through stories? Do you want to just give us kind of a little bit of an elevator pitch of your journey with ocular melanoma so far?
I was diagnosed almost a year ago. It'll be a year in a few weeks, actually. And my diagnosis was a little different, I think, than the typical way that most people are diagnosed with this disease. I actually came into the emergency room with a detached retina. I'd been having no symptoms prior. One night, my 2.5-year-old daughter woke up in the middle of the night. I was sleeping in her bed with her after a nightmare. She rolled over and elbowed me in my right eye, which I really thought nothing of. Toddler limbs are always
so painful.
It was painful. I called out, but we went back to sleep after. Toddler limbs are always flailing, like, moms out there probably relate. And I really thought nothing of it until about a day later when I began to lose vision in my right eye. So I went to the emergency room at Wills Eye Hospital, which is close to me. I live in South Jersey. My emergency room doctors were really surprised to see that I had a detached retina. Usually a toddler's elbow is not strong enough. Yeah. They usually see more severe head trauma come in with a detached retina. But that's when the doctors noticed that the reason my retina was so fragile was because there was a mass underneath of it. And so that's they suspected that it was ocular melanoma. It's really a miracle that my daughter happened to elbow me in the eye that happened to have cancer, which I was having no symptoms of and would have taken much longer to get diagnosed. So it was an unusual path to get there. She is my lifesaver. She is really the reason that we found it in the first place.
That's absolutely insane, and also incredible it like lined up that way, because I know my right eye was kind of similar, that I had a detached retina that was the reason we even found the tumor. But thankfully, well, maybe not thankfully, but mine just kind of randomly detached. There was no head trauma associated with toddlerhood, though I could have had that happen because I did have a baby at the time. So where are you now? You said you're almost a year out. Do you want to share a little of kind of what are some of the things you cope with right now since your diagnosis, like the biopsy results, scans, things like that?
I had my brachytherapy in October of 2023. That's when I really started to get back into reading. And kind of similar to you, I was in the hotel having my brachytherapy, unable to open my left unaffected eye. And so I listened to audiobooks, and that's when I listened to the first ACOTAR book. After I had brachytherapy, I then had to have retina repair, which requires face down for a week straight. And so I really was just staring at my feet for a week straight, and I was able to read during that time, which was also a huge source of support. So going through all of that is really what got me back into reading. Since those treatments, I've had a few other surgeries to treat cataracts. I've started Sutent, so that also is, its own journey with that medication. And I've been having my every 3-month scans, which I need to have as someone who has a high-risk prognosis, similar to you, Danae. I just had my most recent scan last week, and so that came back clear. I now get to have 3 months where I don't have to think about scans, which is a nice little break from it.
Well, and just like you were saying with the whole treatment, like brachytherapy for me was the same, where I couldn't open my left eye. I couldn't hardly open it to like look to go anywhere like the bathroom. I just remember it was so painful. It was like painful to the point of distraction, but I had a hard time actually sleeping. And so I would just kind of rest my eyes. And I was listening to Midnight Sun by Stephanie Myers. And it was when that like initial Twilight perspective from Edward's perspective, those of you who are like Twilight diehards, if you remember that generation of us, I think you and I are probably in that generation. Yeah, the millennials, we're so cheesy. Let's own it, right? I just remember listening to that book and it was so helpful to have that story, even though I knew the story. It was just so helpful to have that to focus on while so many other things were out of my control. And there were just so many other kind of scary aspects to that week of waiting to have the plaque taken off. Also, just the fact that I think you probably relate, your daughter was young enough that you probably couldn't be around her during brachytherapy, right? I couldn't be around both or all three of my kids, including my previously breastfeeding baby. And so that was like devastating to me. And so I really needed those stories, right? I needed the distraction. I needed the connection that I could find in a story. And that was really just life altering in some ways for me in that time.
That escapism can be really healthy and helpful for people who are going through these acute traumatic experiences like each of us was going through at that time. Really being able to sort of provide yourself with a bit of relief from what's actually happening in the moment by using your imagination, getting really deep into a book, getting into this sense of flow where you're really like not thinking about what's happening to you, where you are, your own future, having anxious thoughts about, what this could mean for your future, ruminating on what you've been through in the recent past. It allows us to kind of disconnect from that, which is really important, especially as we're having these very, very acute traumatic experiences. They're like an injury for our brain, and our brain needs time to sort of step away, stop thinking about it for just a few minutes so that it can rest and repair and try to heal.
Well, and I love what you said when we were talking previously, like how you talked about how denial is a form of protection for your brain, like so that it can go through that healing process after something traumatic, like a cancer diagnosis. That was huge for me. I've always associated a cancer diagnosis with this is trauma, but I didn't ever kind of draw that correlation to your brain has to rest and recover. The same way the rest of your body has to rest and recover from, say, surgery, so does your brain.
We can't actively process and heal from things as they're ongoing and as it's so acutely happening. You really need time to have a little distance, a little space from it. Your brain is always working to protect you. Your brain is doing everything it can do to keep you safe from scary big things that are happening in the world. And denial is one really inherent way that our brains operate to try to protect us.
We talk about this idea of escapism, right? And I know you kind of led off talking a little about this. And this is kind of the meat of what we want to cover today. It's just this idea that healthy distractions are reading a book, listening to a story, even watching a good TV show. Those are really, really helpful to our brains so that we can kind of distance ourselves from our diagnosis. So let's talk about some of the ways that it can really be helpful and a positive thing to use that almost healthy denial. For example, I'm looking in our section of talking about things like the uncertainty and the unknown, our distress tolerance. Let's talk a little bit about those things.
There's so much that's uncertain when we're going through the earliest phases of this disease, when you're first diagnosed, when you're going through treatment, so much that's unknown about this. One of the things that can be really protective during that time for people's mental health is to practice distress tolerance, or the idea that we need to sort of be able to sit with these big, scary, uncomfortable emotions. Those emotions are going to happen. We're in something that is, it's logical for us to feel high levels of distress. But how can we sort of help ourselves tolerate that a little bit? Distraction is one really important way that people tolerate distress. It's a skill that, that we practice and talk about a lot in psychology. And distraction is one really important way that people can kind of take a little bit of a break. And whether that's through reading the kinds of books that you and I really love to read. I think other people sort of find that distraction in other avenues through different hobbies or TV shows. It's not always a bad thing to get lost in some activity or some other world. Of course, we have to cope with our reality at some point, and we can't always be lost in this other world. For that time when it's healthy and protective and you're able to sort of step away, it can be a real resource.
And it sounds like it can really just let you process something. It can let you process difficult emotions without actually going through the emotion yourself. I'm trying to explain this, and I don't feel like I'm doing as good of a job as you did, but just like the fear in the story versus your fear in the real life, right? That if you're experiencing fear alongside a character, it's different than when you're actually experiencing that fear because of something that's happening in your life and to you.
Yeah, it can help us practice emotion regulation. So, emotion regulation is this idea that we can, to some degree, tune up or tune down the emotions that we're feeling. And so, when we read a book, naturally, there are emotions that arise as we're on this journey with the character. There's tension, there's stress, there's confusion, there's joy, there's nervousness. We feel apprehensive and we feel triumphant after the big fight and the big battle.
Yeah.
And because we're sort of choosing to put ourselves in that situation, it gives us control over those emotions. And so we're able to feel a little bit of that scary feeling, that fear, that despair, and then naturally sort of watch that emotion resolve on its own. And so this sort of helps us with our own emotions in real life. When we step away from the book, we know that we might feel despair, we might feel stressed, we might feel fear, but it will always come to a lower point. Those emotions peak and then they resolve over time. It can really help us translate those skills outside the world of the book.
Yeah, I love that. And we're going to have to come back to this and talk a little more in depth about the emotional regulation. So stay tuned, because I'm going to get Megan back and we're going to chat a whole lot about emotional regulation and just kind of how this happens through story and the ways that fantasy reading or just reading in general, kind of using that kind of getting lost, can help you to do that. I don't know if you were like this, and maybe you weren't. I know when I first was diagnosed and I lost vision almost completely in my right eye, even before it was enucleated, I had a really hard time feeling like I was capable of reading. I don't know if any of you guys listening have ever had that feeling where you just worry that like, oh, it's going to be too much strain on my eyes, or maybe it literally is, right? It's making you feel super tired. And I know that I feel like really tired even now when I drive for a really long time. And it took me almost a little bit of like some experimenting to get back into the idea that I could actually read and enjoy a book. And it wasn't too taxing for my eye, because I only had one good eye that could do things. I don't know. Did you experience that at all, or did you feel like you were okay?
No, I did. I definitely experienced that. And I think especially as we're sort of adjusting and learning what we're capable of still and where we might need to have more accommodations or supports to help us, it can be a really scary time period to feel like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I can engage with books in the way that I used to before my diagnosis. But I found there's a couple tools that really did help me. First was just having a book light, a physical book light that you clip onto your book that illuminates the page directly in front of it. My husband bought one of those for me, as well as they have versions that like go around your neck. You really look very super cool with these, book lights around your neck, but they help illuminate the page and they have warmer settings and cooler settings based on what your eyes prefer. That was really helpful for me at first. Then I got a Kindle. And I have to say that was the best investment for my reading. I should have done it so much sooner, but being able to like increase the font size of the words on the Kindle has made it so much less taxing for my left eye to read.
Yeah.
There's definitely tools and supports, out there. It just takes a little experimenting.
Well, and we can't forget audiobooks. Audiobooks count, guys. They totally count. And I know there's kind of this stigma in the reading world, like if you, are doing reading book club, things like that. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, if you're just listening, you're not really reading. Your brain is still absorbing the information. It's just a different way. And it still totally counts.
Audiobooks totally count. Also, so funny, Danae, that you and I were both like, we couldn't open our eyes and we listened to the audiobooks.
Yes,
like
we found a way.
No.
I couldn't even watch a TV show. My doctor was like, oh, just watch a TV show. It'll be fine. I'm like, literally cannot open this eye. It will not open. I cannot even try to open it because it was so painful when the muscles would try to work together and all of that. Ugh. Even though we listen to audiobooks, even though we read on Kindles, we still gather book trophies. They're the best. They're the beautiful books you want on your shelf. Yeah, I love my book trophies. I keep getting more of them, and I'm sure I'm driving my husband a little bit crazy. But I love my book trophies, and I love looking at my books. I also love being able to share that my kids or share the books that I'm enjoying with my kids, right? And I mean, I've been getting books since I was little. That was my birthday present from about the time I was 10 or 11 on, was a Barnes & Noble gift card so I could get new books from the bookstore. And that was my favorite thing.
It's a great point, though, because I love that my daughter can watch me read physical books, because even though she doesn't know how to read yet, she has her books that she flips through, and it's still an activity that we can do together where I can look through my physical books while she's looking at her books. And then I also just think about how she sees the books on my shelf and, the example that I'm setting for her about reading as a healthy skill and hobby and strategy for her in her own coping.
Yeah, I love it. So let's just give a few examples of some of the books that you have read. Let's just run through maybe 3 titles each that we both have read more recently or just in the past. It could be a series even, because I know some of the books are like lots of books.
Yes. Okay. Here's some like top favorites. I already mentioned Kingdom of Ash earlier in this conversation, but the entire Throne of Glass series I think was so critical for me during this time. I really identified with the main character's journey. I really felt like so much of what she went through was reflective of what I was going through. I was able to channel her strength, her like inner resilience. And so I would recommend Throne of Glass, I think, to anybody who is going through what we're going through.
Also recommend, highly recommend.
Another that I read more recently, which is still in the fantasy realm, is called When the Moon Hatched. And
yes. Oh, I just finished this one.
I am like dying to talk about this with you, Danae. I loved this book so much. This really hit on so many important themes for me, especially about like love, loss, death, grief, memory, just so many things that I think are so important for me. And the main character's journey here, again, is one that I really connected with, especially in the later parts of the story.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Okay. Do you have one more that you want to share?
I have one more that I want to share. I would be remiss if I did not talk about Fate Inked in Blood, which was such a surprise hit for me. Oh, it's so good. I'm not usually a Viking fantasy person, so I really didn't have this high on my list, but I actually loved it. The main character, Freya, is just someone who I really felt like was so strong, and she is a leader, especially at a time when, or like in a setting where women are not leaders. She's really somebody who did not let what anybody said stop her. She's a fighter. She's courageous. She's strong. She's got the power of the gods. She's incredible. And so this was such a wonderful surprise for me.
I have loved some of the same books that you have read. I've read When the Moon Hatched. I've read the whole Throne of Glass series, which was so incredible. I'm actually rereading it now because I've loved it so much. All of Sarah J. Maas's books have been so good for me. But before all of that, like kind of my childhood core memories of all the things that I have almost used to process my cancer diagnosis was Harry Potter. And so I know to each their own, some people won't read it, they don't like it, whatever. But I have really found a lot of meaning in Harry Potter and in some of the quotes from Harry Potter. Like things like happiness can only be found when you turn on the light. And to me, that's like this choice, right? That I have a choice. When I'm confronted with something that's happening to me, I get to choose when to get back up and when to choose to keep living life despite maybe the hard, horrible things that are happening to me, like a recurrent cancer diagnosis or whatever. And I think maybe the one thing that has helped me the most in my cancer diagnosis is actually the quote from Dumbledore. And it's the fear of a name only increases fear of a thing itself. And so if you guys found me on social media, right? If you follow this podcast or you follow our YouTube channel and it's because you found Danae on social media, it's probably because I was posting at the beginning of my cancer journey all about the meaning that I was making using Harry Potter stories and Harry Potter quotes and things like the Dementors and Horcruxes. Having my plaque was like having a Horcrux. And so if you know what a Horcrux is, taking the Horcrux off, you feel this instantaneous weight lifted. And for me, having the plaque removed, it was this huge weight that was lifted. I no longer had pain and I was no longer tired. Like I had so many better physical symptoms after it was removed. That's just one of the ways that I've made meaning. And one of the biggest things that I have done throughout my cancer diagnosis that has helped me cope has been to talk about it. Talk about it with my therapist, talk about it with my family, talk about it with my kids. I don't hide behind my cancer diagnosis or hide from it. I confront it. And I think that for me, at least, that has helped it to not grow out of control into this kind of big, scary fear and anxiety that almost is a monster under my bed, so to speak.
Yeah, totally. And that's true from the research too. We know how important it is to be able to directly talk about and face the difficult things that we're going through. And it's amazing to see, I think Harry Potter is such a source of strength for so many people, especially again in our millennial age, for us to think back about, all the metaphors that are in those books and the ways that we can apply them to our own lives. And the idea that not calling something by its name only increases the fear of it, I think is really true in so many different ways.
It's helping us get to that place of acceptance, right? Because putting our head in the sand, so to speak, doesn't actually make it go away. It just allows it to kind of fester or to be something that we're no longer developing tools to cope with it, right? To cope with our diagnosis. And it's so important that we learn to cope so that we can thrive and so that we can survive well. And so that cancer really doesn't get to take up more space than it deserves. I mean, I feel that. That's so important to me.
Absolutely. It's if we can't even talk about what it is, we're going to spend a whole lot of time, coping with it. And I think like being able to say, yes, I have cancer and I am so many other things as well is something that starts by facing it, naming it head on, and then being able to sort of move into all the other spaces of our lives where we get to be fulfilled and find meaning and joy and love and connection, in so many different ways that are separate from cancer.
Just kind of general myth busting here. I think a lot of us associate the idea of disassociation or denial or escapism, healthy denial, any of those kinds of things. We see it almost in a negative light. It's a word, denial, I know for sure, is a word that we have kind of negatively framed in our brains, maybe just as our part of our culture. So let's just kind of overall sum up, myth bust the idea that like denial is not bad. It actually can be really good. What are just kind of like to sum up your thoughts on that?
I think when we're going through these acute traumas, there are a few ways of processing. There are some more active ways of processing, and that's talking about it in therapy, getting support, getting all of the medical treatment, doing all of the active things. We need to balance that with some of those more passive ways of coping, which are those distraction, getting immersed in something else. There's this idea called flow, which is a concept from the positive psychology literature that when we are fully absorbed in an activity that we really enjoy, that really brings well-being and positive emotions for people. And so the idea of flow, the state of flow, feeling as though you're doing something that you enjoy, time is passing, you're disconnected from what's happening, you're totally immersed in reading, painting, listening to music, whatever it may be. That's really positive and healthy for our mental health. And so if we can balance those two different kinds of processing, the active talking about cancer, naming it head on process with the more passive reading, getting into flow, getting immersed, just, working on our distress tolerance, that's really going to be an optimal way to cope with what we're going through.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's so important. Like you said, it's a balance, right? It's not that you're only escaping your cancer diagnosis by distraction or whatever it is. It's a balance. That's so important. So you mentioned at one point, kind of this idea that, okay, we're going through this diagnosis. It's life-altering news. It can be an injury or a trauma to the brain. And that there's kind of initially, it can feel like there's really not any time. And I'm sure you guys listening, like you guys, if you've gone through an ocular melanoma diagnosis, you know that when you first get diagnosed, about the first 3 to 6 months are just kind of chaos. You're getting scans. You have lots of doctor's appointments. You are getting follow-ups. You're having your procedures done. You're then getting more scans. Maybe you're getting blood work. Like there's just so much going on, so many balls rolling, and it can kind of feel like you just don't get a break. So one of the things that we talked about at the end, or that we wanted to cover at the end, was this idea of getting to that place where things kind of settle and then choosing some things that are a little more intentional, kind of alongside things like reading or distracting yourself well.
I think that's really where things like journaling, therapy can come into place where you're sort of processing what's happening. I am a psychologist and I'm someone who's been in therapy for many years for anxiety and various different things. So I was really lucky to already have a therapist when I was diagnosed. But I really feel that that was such an important tool for me, both during that chaotic first 3 to 6 month period, just so I had a space to talk about things that were happening. But now so that I can talk about the way that it's affected me and how I want to move forward and how much I don't want it to affect me moving forward and the ways in which I want to not be somebody who is affected by their diagnosis to the extent that that's possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I just think after that certain time point where many of the more urgent, immediate, we need to have this treatment today to save your life. After that wave is kind of over and you're able to almost adjust a little bit to this new normal, that's really when more of that active processing can really take the lead.
So what are some of the things that you have done intentionally? I know you said you just had scans, and I do something like this too, so I'm going to let you share what it is. But do you plan anything after scans, before scans, that kind of helps you have something to either look forward to or to distract yourself from? How do you tend to do things with your scans?
Me and my family, we're like getting into our routine of this now that we have a year of this under our belts. I usually have my scans on a Thursday. My husband takes off of work and comes with me. We have the scans, we go have a meal afterwards, and then we usually go away for the weekend, and we're trying to pick different places to go each time so that, you know, we get to explore and go somewhere new, and our toddler comes with us, and that always makes everything that much more of an adventure. And so we've traveled to, you know, just a few different weekend trips. I usually also try to plan a massage or just some time for myself during that weekend trip so that I can do something that feels good for my body. And then, of course, I'm a big self-care girl, and having bubble baths and really setting myself up with a sensory experience that helps me just feel really good in my skin is really important to me. So I always try to take a really luxurious bubble bath with candles, music, just sort of get myself into a very relaxed state. Especially because that waiting period before my oncology follow-up, you know, is a really difficult time for me. And the physical sensation of being in a hot bath with good smelling candles and drinking a hot tea really helps me just, you know, stay present in the moment with what I can worry about that's in front of me right now, not be thinking about my scan results.
You said something about worrying before. There was like this quote that I loved, and I would love if you have it in front of you. Do you want to share that?
Yeah. I think this is the quote from Seneca, who I think is an ancient philosopher, who said, "He who worries suffers twice." Mm. And I think that's just something that I've carried with me. There's a self-help writer now, Ryan Holiday, who talks a lot about Seneca's quotes. And I think he's kind of brought it back a little into the more popular dialogue. And that quote just always stuck with me. Like, he who worries suffers twice. And it's so true, especially with our diagnosis. We try to do all of the things that we can possibly do to stay as healthy as possible. But at the end of the day, you know, if we have very little control. And so worrying means that we suffer twice. We suffer not knowing if something's going to happen, and then we suffer when it does. And it's helped me to tune down some of my worry, to remember that I have control about how much I worry, and I can tune some of that down to prevent myself from suffering when I don't need to.
Well, and I think, you know, just from a psychological perspective, it's been helpful for me to understand that worrying is one of my brain's ways of trying to protect me. It's not because there's something wrong with me, because I'm not doing enough of something, like I'm not meditating enough, or I'm not, I don't know, doing enough of something. It has nothing to do with any of that. It just is my brain trying to protect me. And it's trying to come up with a solution to a kind of an unseen threat, so to speak. Because when we're waiting for scan results and we have what feels like almost an axe hanging over our heads, right? Like, you guys, I'm sure you get this, like, you feel helpless to some degree. You absolutely feel helpless. And when our brains feel helpless, they look for how they can help us. And they want to have answers, right? They want solutions. And so then we're presented with all of the worries, the millions and millions of worries. And if you're an anxious worrier like maybe me and Megan, then you might just kind of spiral really fast. So just know that as you're learning these skills, as maybe you're applying some of the things that Megan has talked about here today, it doesn't all happen overnight. You're still going to experience some of those stressful feelings where you experience the worry. I was texting you this week, and I know you were stressed and you were worried about not having results in a timely manner. I'm sure you can attest to the fact that you felt the worry ahead of when it was actually needed to be worried about, if that made sense. So you know what that feels like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a work in progress for sure, and it always will be. I think one thing that really helps me is to remember that worrying is sort of a like false flag at times. It can feel productive. It can feel like we're doing something. I have no control, but at least I can sort of imagine all these different avenues and think about all these different ways that I might be able to prepare for something. And at the end of the day, you know, we can prepare as much as we want, and we will still never truly feel prepared for the thing that we're worried about. And so sort of remembering that it's sort of an illusion that worrying feels helpful, that actually has helped me to say, like, actually, it is not that productive. And it is okay for me to feel like I can put my worries in a box on the shelf and go do something that's going to make me feel good in this moment, like reading a book. exercising, playing outside with my daughter, doing anything that makes me feel joy in this moment, because that is so valid and important.
One of the things, maybe you guys come up against this when you're trying to find or do something you enjoy, can also be that when you have so many things to deal with, you have so many diagnoses, I don't know, maybe you've got doctor's appointments to follow up with, you've got phone calls to make, insurance calls to make, like who knows what you're dealing with. I know I have a lot on my plate right now with my medical diagnosis and kind of the extra things I have to navigate, for lack of anything else. It's kind of an ongoing flow of things that I always have to do. And sometimes, because I'm a type A person and I have this idea that, you know, I want to check all the boxes, sometimes I can get a little caught up in the idea that I have to be productive and that I need to accomplish something, and that reading isn't going to accomplish that something. And I think that it helps me, at least sometimes, to just kind of catch myself and remember that, like we talked about at the beginning, it is so important for our brains to have time to recover. And reading, escaping, watching a TV show, doing something you thoroughly enjoy, you guys, that is so powerful. And it is so helpful so that you can just be fresh and that your brain is functioning well. So anyway, Megan, is there anything you want to say to end before we close out and come back another day?
You know, I think if there's one thing that I would want everyone to take away, it's that those moments where you're able to feel more joy, where you're able to disconnect a little bit, where you're able to sort of find some support through reading, through positive activities, through hobbies, whatever it may be, that is as productive and as important as checking off that to-do list, because you're really investing in setting yourself up to be able to do those things and to enjoy, you know, the time that is in front of you. It's important and it's powerful. And I think that would be like the one thing for Danae and I, that's through reading. I'm so grateful that reading has brought us together. Thank you so much for having me on. This is so fun.
It's been so fun. I cannot wait to have you come back. And we're going to talk more with Megan about emotional regulation and how kind of using reading can help you process that. Just to end, I'm going to show my favorite 2 non-fantasy books for those of you who are not fantasy readers. So this is a really, really powerful book. If you haven't ever read this one, Megan, recommend this to you. Radical Remission by Kelly A. Turner. And I have no idea if this is backwards. I'm sorry. But it's Radical Remission by Kelly Turner. And then I loved this book. If you guys have never listened to Glennon Doyle talk, she is so funny and she writes the way that she talks. And this is like a memoir. And I mean, I have like covered this thing in notes and anecdotes, and it has been such a funny read for me. Like, she is hilarious. Like, I just remember cackling and reading out loud. So that would be my 2 books to say, if you're not a fantasy reader, go and read one of those. And just to review, Megan, do you want to just show up like the books that you shared that were some of your absolute favorites, that if you are a fantasy reader or you want to become a romantasy reader, please try these. They're so good.
Yes, this is Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle Jensen, When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker, and Kingdom of Ash, which is part of the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas.
Don't read that one first. That one's at the end, the very, very last one. Anyway, okay, you guys. Well, Megan, thank you again. Let's go live by our motto here of the whole idea that a book a day keeps the mental breakdowns away. And I will see you guys next time. All right, bye.